Welcome to the Author Show, where we always present new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You name it, and you will find it here. To watch the TV version of the show, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hello, and welcome back to the Author Show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming to the program author Bob Mottram, and Bob is the author of In Search of America's Heartbeat, 12 Months on the Road. Bob, how are you?
I'm just fine, Don. Thank you.
You went on the road for 12 months.
That's correct. Yeah, a little over 12 months, 13 months actually.
13 months?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now you and your wife went together.
We went together after I retired from newspaper journalism, and she retired from her work as a public health nurse.
Now, why did the two of you make this trip? What was your goal here?
Well, our goal was to see if we could find the essence of America, what we thought of as the real America, wherever we might find it, and if we found it, we told each other we wanted to put our hand on its heart. We wanted to find its heartbeat, put our hand on its heart, and see if we could feel the rhythm. See if we could find out what this country we'd lived in all of our lives was really all about.
Did you find it? And if so, where was it?
Yeah, we did, and we found it in a variety of places. We discovered that the real America lives in many places, and the interesting thing is that wherever we found its heartbeat, we discovered that the rhythm is different. And I was born on the East Coast, Don, and grew up in the New York metro area, and I've lived and worked in New York and northern New England, the Dakotas, in the Pacific Northwest where I live now, and California and Alaska, and life in so many different places I think has attuned me to cultural nuance. I love to see how people live in different places, and to see how their cultural and physical environments affect their lifestyle. I've discovered that people may essentially be the same at heart everywhere, but they don't live the same. They don't behave the same. Their outlook on life and their view of the world are not the same. And sometimes the differences are subtle, but they're significant and they're fascinating.
How did you travel?
Well, we traveled with a big diesel pickup truck towing a fifth-wheel trailer, a 32-foot long trailer. We camped each night along the way, and it turns out we spent a year on the road without a single night in a motel or a hotel. Now,
how long did you stay in each place?
Well, that depended. We wanted to be as flexible as we could in our travels. We didn't want to lock ourselves into anything very far ahead, so we basically planned only 24 hours ahead by calling ahead to a campground where we thought we might be the next night and arranging accommodations. When we got there, if we liked the place, we might stay for several days or several weeks. If it didn't jump out and appeal to us, we'd move on.
All right. So you come into a new place and you set up camp and all of that. What'd you do during the day?
Well, during the day we'd hit the back roads. There's not much you can do back roads wise with a 32-foot trailer dragging behind. So we would go from campsite to campsite, set up camp, unhitch the truck, and head for the hills, and try to see as much and meet as many people as we could in the time that we were there.
Now, as you went from place to place, roughly, how far did you travel each day?
Well, it would depend. The farthest day of travel was in the Midwest. One day we traveled over 350 miles. The shortest day was about 2 miles between two campgrounds in Fort Myers Beach, Florida. But normally on days when we traveled at all, which was a minority of days, we'd travel less than 200 miles, and we'd get up and about 6 and have a leisurely breakfast to be on the road by 9. That's after the rush hour. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which was before the afternoon rush hour, if we're in an urban area, we'd be making camp in a new place and looking around to see what tweaked our interest.
I know this is going to be a difficult question to answer, but did you happen to discover a favorite place?
Oh yeah, we discovered many favorite places. One of the things that surprised us was how much we liked certain areas we hadn't expected to particularly like. I can think of the desert Southwest and Florida is another example, and other places. I could mention some of them specifically if you're interested. California, it's so large and has such physical variety and economic and agricultural variety. California's old hat to a lot of Northwesterners, ourselves included, but we tried to view it with fresh eyes, and it's really impressive. It's like a country all by itself. It contains more people, Don, than Canada. And if it were a country, it would have the 5th largest economy in the world. It's an amazing place. Southern Appalachians. It was our first visit there, so everything was brand new for us, and so many things jumped out at us. One of the things we discovered there, we got a feeling for what a watershed experience the war between the states had been for that society. I'd lived many years in the north, in the northeast, and there's nothing comparable there. That's not an issue, but we found in the south many people still live with an awareness of it, probably because so much of it was fought on southern land. And it becomes apparent after a while that this experience is still very much on people's minds. You begin to appreciate the searing impression it made on so much of the southern psyche. Northern New England, where people's worldview has been developed over multiple generations by tough winters, by agriculture that in many cases was little more than subsistence farming, and by small scale manufacturing, and it's a beautiful place, but its people are known for their taciturnity and their frugality. And you look around at the country and the climate, and you can see why. Another one of our favorite places is South Dakota, where the east meets west. It's a place where the sun bakes the land in summer, and vicious blizzards buffet the country much of the rest of the year. Rapid City, the Black Hills, the Badlands, the Plains, they're populated, we found, by no-nonsense people who are tough, who consider themselves equal to any challenge, but at the same time are mostly good-natured and friendly and hospitable and have an expansive outlook on life.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, I lived in the Northeast like yourself for 20-some-odd years, and then I moved to the South. I've been here for, I guess, almost 25 years now, and I can certainly relate to what you're saying. I mean, when I got down here, it was like the what war? And to this day, I mean, 25 years I've been here, I'm still called the Yankee, because I came down here with a Yankee attitude. I was going to tell everybody how we did it up north, and now when I go to visit, I tell everybody how we do it down south. It's really funny. Was it very expensive to spend a whole year on the road?
Well, we worried about that before the trip, but what we found out was that we were actually able to live on the road in our fifth wheel and travel freely without restriction for less than it had cost us to live at home. We were living at that time in Tacoma, Washington, and fuel when we made the trip was about $2 a gallon, a little bit less expensive than it is today, but we found that fuel and vehicle maintenance and campground fees and other costs, including entertainment, amounted to less than we had paid for taxes and utilities and insurance and so forth at our permanent home in Tacoma.
Now, what makes this book different, in your opinion, from other books in the same genre?
Well, it's a road trip story, Don, but it's more than just a road trip story. It's a story of discovery and loss, and a story of grief and joy. During the time we were on the road, Karen and I, we lost my father to Alzheimer's disease, which is just a really horrible disease that without exception it takes not only your life but your dignity as well, and it tempered that whole year of our lives. And we learned, though, that grief and sadness is not the end of the road. It's the gifts we found along the way in our travels made life abundantly worth living in spite of the grief that we were experiencing. I might mention, too, that within the book talks about the story of our road trip. It talks about the story of my dad and his descent into his final days with Alzheimer's, but it also talks about many fascinating Americans, most of whom you've never heard of, and fascinating people we encountered en route. And I've tried to tell their stories with humor and with insight, into their human condition.
Now, you were a journalist for how many years?
More than 40 years.
And then you retired, I assume?
I retired, yeah. I worked more than 30 years in daily newspapers. I worked for nearly 8 years with the Associated Press. I was an AP newsman and correspondent. So that pretty much gave me my background for writing. And in fact, when Karen and I started this trip, I had no intention of doing a book. And I found that as the trip progressed, so many interesting things were happening to us, were occurring before our eyes, that I just felt compelled to write about it. And it's one of the few times in my life I've actually felt compelled to write. To
have to write?
Yeah, right.
And the minute you no longer have to write, you immediately turn around and start writing. So how do you find the difference between those two? I mean, writing for a living and now really writing as a tool to satisfy your soul. What is the difference there?
Well, when you write for a living, you write whether you feel like it or not, and sometimes you do feel like it, but sometimes you don't. But you have to write anyway. And writing in a situation like this was just a compulsion. I carry a little. My years as a reporter have trained me to carry a little tape recorder in my shirt pocket, and I can take it out and make notes as I travel. And I was beginning to do that, and along about we left Washington State and headed south along the Pacific Coast, and by the time I got to California or Arizona, I began to realize this was great stuff that was happening, and it speaks to the what an interesting country we live in. And I would come home at night and transcribe my notes. I'd come home to the trailer and transcribe my notes, and then I had all these notes, what to do with them. So I began to send email letters to friends. Gradually, my email mailing list increased as other people found out about these stories I was sending and asked to be added to the mailing list. And then in the final analysis, several of my friends who are writers or editors told me, hey, you've got a book here. And that's what got me to really seriously considering doing the book.
Have you learned anything from all this?
Oh yeah, it was certainly an educational experience. We learned several things, Don. We learned, for one thing, that Americans from coast to coast and from one corner of the country to the other, as different as they are, they still meet life with courage and with optimism. And at the start of this trip, we weren't sure if we would find that, in the wake of 9/11 and all the terrible things that have been going on in the Middle East. But we found courage and we found optimism everywhere we went. We learned a renewed respect for the United States and its people. developed a tremendous pride in being tiny threads in what we see as a fabric that's so diverse, but yet so tightly woven and so strong. We had no idea how strong that fabric was until we made this trip. And we found also that a year is much too short a time to do what we did. We traveled more than 30,000 miles in our months on the road, and we poked into as many places as we could, and we dug as deeply as we could, and we found that we barely scratched the surface.
Time is getting very short, so the most important question, where can we find this book?
Well, the book is available online from Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, all of the usual locations. It's also available on my own personal website, which is www.rvacrosstheusa.com.
This has been very enlightening. Our guest today has been Bob Mottram, and Bob is the author of In Search of America's Heartbeat, 12 Months on the Road. Bob, thanks very much for being with us today.
You're welcome, Don. Thank you so much for having me.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. If you're an author or know an author, learn how you can help a publisher publish you by visiting helpapublisherpublishyou.com. Each week you'll receive a listing of publishers, small presses, and others who may be interested in publishing your work. Visit www.helpapublisherpublishyou.com, and this is a free service of The Author Show. If you'd like to be a guest on The Author Show, visit www.theauthorshow.com, fill out the form, and we may be contacting you shortly. Join us tomorrow for another great guest.
Thank you for listening to The Author Show. To contact us about the show, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 1-877-955-8800. Or visit WNBNetworkWest.com. Tune in next time for another great author on The Author Show.